My name is Darcia Narvaez, and I'm a retired professor of psychology from the University of Notre Dame. Well, I'm an integrative person, so I use disciplinary scientific information from various branches of science and integrate them to try to answer the question, where did humanity go wrong and what can we do about it? And that's been my passion for a very long time. So the answers that we have the answers. I mean, we know it in our hearts, but we've blocked all that energy. But science now is actually showing us, if you look at the converging evidence, that our hearts were right all along. Well, we forgot what the wellness informed pathway is for our species. You provide for basic needs, especially in early childhood when the brain is constructing itself from experience, co-constructed by experience. And in those years, you're setting up the parameters and thresholds for all sorts of systems. And there's various sensitive periods, critical periods for establishing certain systems that if you miss it, then there's a gap in development that you might not see right away. But later on, when the brain is growing rapidly in adolescence, there might then be, the foundations get scrambled, and you can become depressed and anxious and suicidal and such because you don't have all your fullness of your capacities. So we forgot about how to raise the young, and we end up then with people who are dysregulated in various systems, and that's at the neurobiological level, but it also affects our social capacities and our moral capacities, which is my area of study. It's hard to be compassionate when you're threat reactive because your stress response kicks in and the blood flow shifts away from your higher order thinking, from being open-hearted, open-minded. And so you get into self-protection. You brace yourself against others. You brace yourself against new ideas, new ways of being, just to try to stay safe and feel okay and secure, because you have a deep sense of insecurity that you've learned then to rely on scripts and formulas and ideologies to make you feel safe, because you don't have the safety inside. But when we raise people with the evolved nest, then we develop our full nature, because you build security and connection from the bottom up, and you're able to reach your potential in so many ways. The evolved nest is what every animal provides their young to optimize normal development. And our nest is very similar to the social mammalian nest, which is 75 million years old. And we've been around for 2 million years. And most of our existence, we provided the nest without question. That means you meet the baby's needs, keep them calm, have a soothing pregnancy and birth, and staying with mother and other caregivers with lots of affectionate touch and free play and a welcoming climate, a social climate. And free play means you get to run around and climb trees and everything without being restricted, and not organized sports. And that's with multiple age groups. And it's having a set of responsive relationships other than just mother or mother and father. It's a set of village of care. Then also you're immersed in the natural world. So you build relationships with the landscape around you, the animals, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and you feel like they're part of your community too. And you learn to respect them and listen to them. And then there's routine or regular healing practices, ceremonies that keep you centered in your open-heartedness instead of that bracing that I talked about. So that's our nest. And we forgot about it in the civilization, essentially. It's been degraded over millennia, but especially in the last centuries, especially in the last decades, in the United States in particular. And you can see that there's trauma in the way we raise people, and that stays in your body. And you pass it on to the next generation if you don't heal it. And so we have multiply traumatized people who then are in the bracing mode against life and have to, grab what they can, because they don't feel like they can survive without whatever that ideology is, whether it's capitalism or some religion or some political orientation. Then they can't connect. So they only connect to that idea. And so this is left brain takes over ideology because when you don't provide the nest, you undermine the right brain's development. It's scheduled to grow more rapidly in the first years of life. And it is the grounding for our social and emotional intelligence and all sorts of little capacities that grow even before language starts. And we often don't provide the kind of village of care and all the things that I mentioned to young children, to babies. And so they don't develop those skills and they end up with kind of a missing pattern. And then we send them to school. Well, before we send them to school, they're going to be stress reactive, right? If you leave babies to cry, then their stress response gets expanded into, going into shrieking the parameters for their stress response, rather than if you keep a baby calm, their thresholds, their stress response is pretty mild. It doesn't ever go to shrieking because they never practiced it. So whatever babies practice in those early years, they become. So you're shaping personality by what kind of care you're providing. And so if you're unnested, you're going to be very self-protective, just automatically. That's the way your neurobiology works. It's going to affect how you think, what you perceive, what actions you think are possible. And then you carry that forward. And we have a lot of kids coming to school who are, they can't sit still. They're anxious. They can't learn. When you're anxious or angry, you can't learn, at least what's expected to be learned. And then schooling tells you forget about feelings, forget about nature connection, forget about, community and all the things outside this room. Just focus on what I'm telling you, learn it and regurgitate it. And that's left brain stuff. And so we undermine the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere is our heart. That's where our heart-mindedness is. I mean, it needs the left hemisphere too as a subcomponent of this larger capacity to be human, which is rooted in our social and emotional intelligence, our heart-mindedness. So where did this come from and why are parents blamed for it? Well, we have an individualistic oriented dominant culture, which is again the left hemisphere. Right? The left hemisphere doesn't know relationships. It can't deal with dynamic flow. It just likes static things, subject, object. And so then when you undermine the right hemisphere development, you are now going to enhance that static view of the world. And so it becomes a blaming system, really. It's your fault, parents, that your children are acting out or whatever. But the evolved nest is about a community of care, and parents do not care for their children in responsive ways unless they feel the support of the community. And that means they need to be welcomed. Mothers need to be welcomed. They need to be the center of society, mothers and children, in order to move away from this very individualistic orientation that has just gone to the nth degree with capitalism, with unfettered capitalism. So the evolved nest is our heritage. It's in our genes or in our hearts. It's actually not in our genes. It's an extra genetic, outside of genes inheritance to provide the nest. And the culture has pushed us against that and forces parents and others, grandparents and neighbors, to kind of, ignore young children's needs. So we need to restructure things so that mothers and children come first. The well-being of everyone's basic needs comes first. Because the nest actually is something we all need. It's not just after birth and breastfeeding. It's the welcome. We need welcoming communities. We need responsive relationships and mentors throughout our lives. And we need play and nature immersion and connection and healing practices to get us back in balance with one another, with ourselves, with nature. And so it is a restructuring issue. And I think it fits very well with localization, because I think localization starts with meeting the needs of babies. Well, these are issues for therapists and communities of healing. And it can happen that those who have been traumatized can be healed. It's best to have someone skilled at healing to help you through this. You need to have some insight that, what you experienced is not normal, or is not the way things have to be. and have some experience, some friendship, somebody reached out to you and your heart was touched and starts to open up that blockage that you've built to protect yourself. And nature connection is one way to do that, to sit in nature in a sit spot and just over time, the same space or place, you sit there and spend 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour. And over time, your senses open up and you start to get connected to the natural world, to Mother Earth, to Gaia. And that starts to heal you and you start to break the barriers inside. So there are ways to do it on your own, ideally in a community setting where you have playful interactions with my students, undergraduate students, many of them depressed or anxious and worried and just stressed out. I taught them folk song games that we would play together. And you're touching people, you're singing, you're laughing, you're moving around. Your vagus nerve is getting stimulated. That's something that gets underdeveloped with unnestedness. Your vagus nerve is linked to all the major organs and systems of the body and needs to be well functioning for them to not go awry as you through your life. And the vagus nerve is stimulated, oxytocin system hopefully is getting stimulated too. And then you're able to let go of some of that worry because you're in the present moment, you're growing your right hemisphere because you're playing. And you have to be in the moment to know what to do next, right? With the play. And this is a structured system, so it helps those who are underdeveloped because it's a game that you know what you have to do, unlike the free play, which young children need. That would be kind of scary for adults who are, unplayful as a result of their experiences. And then what we would do, the college students we'd take our games and play with kindergartners. We teach the kindergartners how to play. And then the students see these young 5-year-olds jumping around with glee and all this, and they, wow, how important it is for, enlivening others to play with them in these very communal ways. So I think there's various ways to heal, and we all have probably ideas about how to do that. So back to the unfolding of that beautiful uniqueness that you have, that beautiful gift that we all carry, some unique offering to the world that is with unnestedness, you hide it, you can't develop it. But when you have an opportunity to heal, to grow, it's going to unfold, especially in a community that's accepting, that's loving and caring.